Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. The mission of U.S. Forces Korea seems to be shifting. For the first time, its top commander, General Xavier Brunson, is publicly signaling that the focus is no longer solely on deterring North Korea, but increasingly on countering China as well. Now, this isn't just a policy tweak. It's a strategic redefinition with massive implications for South Korea's security posture and alliance dynamics. Under Trump's renewed leadership, Washington seems to be doubling down on military flexibility and forward deployment. To help us read into the latest announcements, we are joined here in the studio by Go Myong-hyun, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for National Security Strategy. Welcome.
Thank you.
And also joining us online is Brian Myers, a Professor of International Studies at Dongseol University. Good to see you, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with Dr. Go. So like I've said, on May 15th, the USFK commander said that the USFK is not only focused on North Korea, implying an expanded role to contain China as well. He even likened South Korea to an aircraft carrier floating between China and Japan. What is the significance of such kind of remarks?
So it's not the first time that the Korean Peninsula or the South Korea, especially the U.S. forces presence in South Korea, was characterized as an unthinkable aircraft carrier by security experts. So in fact, it's a very important remark, and I would like to say that this is more of a reaffirmation of the strategic importance of South Korea in the overall security architecture that the United States essentially building up right now in this part of the world. So in order to understand this remark, we have to understand the context. So there's been some debate in Washington about the importance of South Korea, especially the alliance the United States has with South Korea, whether this is still essentially valid at the time when the China is presumed to be the biggest security challenge to the United States. So there's a movement of shifting the weight of the security alliance, security architecture in this part of the world from Korea to Japan. But General Brunson is essentially reaffirming that South Korea, in a way, is just as important as Japan is to the U.S. security in the Indo-Pacific region. So this is, in fact, you could even take it as a retort on some of the discussion that's being done in Washington, that the United States should reduce its weight of focus on the Korean Peninsula and reorient its defense posture towards Japan and Taiwan. So sure, there's this implication that South Korea could be enmeshed in potential conflict with China if the United States or China, the current strategic competition for some reason gets out of control and then converts into some sort of military conflict. But having said that, though, South Korea will remain as an important ally to the United States, even after the security architecture changes in the character. So in that sense, overall, it's a good message for South Korea.
So if this mission of USFK expanding to include broader objectives like containing China as well, concerns also have been arising about a possible military vacuum on in the Korean Peninsula. Professor Myers, how do you believe this change in the role of USFK could realistically lead to a weakened response capability regarding Pyongyang's nuclear threats?
Yeah, I do worry about that. I think I'm more worried than Dr. Go is. I think it could very well strain USFK's resources if it's facing two directions at once, so to speak. You know, during the Cold War, US troops in Western Europe were facing more enemy states, but they were one bloc at that time acting under Soviet leadership, whereas China and North Korea are independently acting states, which pose very different military threats. And that has to mean that some US troops and assets are going to be focused more on China, and some are going to be focused more on North Korea. So how does that not result in a fragmentation of attention when China's military has strategic nodes pretty much up and down the Pacific? Now, I know General Brunson says North Korea is the greatest challenge, But do the Americans really think so? Aren't they more worried about China now? And I know some people here are thinking, well, the United States and South Korea can just strengthen the trilateral alliance, the trilateral cooperation with Japan, turn it into a kind of Asian NATO. But let's be realistic. There's a very good possibility that the next administration here has no interest in such a thing. And, you know, to be honest, I don't really like this aircraft carrier talk because I worry that turning South Korea into a symbolic aircraft carrier with a largely anti-Chinese mission could result in disunity in the alliance because for obvious economic reasons, South Korea just cannot afford to alienate its biggest export market. And you can't very well expect Chinese consumers to be purchasing South Korean products when you know your whole country seems to be in an adversarial relationship to China.
Right, exactly. And even a partial shift in operational focus might create exploitable gaps, especially since North Korea, continues to develop its weapons arsenal. Now, let's turn back to Trump. So during his first term, his administration was largely focused on increasing the burden sharing in terms of defense costs. But now it appears he's more committed to reshaping the U.S. forces' role and pushing for strategic flexibility. Why do you think is the reason behind this shift?
I don't think it's really a shift. I think the renegotiation of the burden sharing is still on the table. It's just that it's not being brought up yet. And then also there's an interesting divisional labor this time compared to the first term. Clearly, the burden sharing was on top of the agenda when it comes to alliance relations between the United States and South Korea. But this time around, I think the burden sharing has been subsumed into the trade negotiations track. So I think this time around, the defense burden sharing is going to come up when either the Treasury Secretary Steve Bessent or the USTR, the United States Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, will try to renegotiate the trade relations as well as other macroeconomic policy that Korea has that the United States is critical of. And then I think as a counter offer or part of the offer, the burden sharing is going to be put on the table. So this is something unusual in the sense that the burden sharing follows the defense dialogue track between Washington and Seoul, and we have never seen this being discussed in the context of trade negotiations. But then, based on the remarks that's been said in Washington, the U.S. government representatives have mentioned that burden sharing is going to figure highly in the context of trade negotiations, and that also was the case in the ongoing trade negotiations between the United States and Japan. So in that sense, I think it's still very much this issue is very much alive. It's going to be brought up. So the strategic flexibility, I think it's going to follow the traditional defense dialogue track. It's being brought up. It's being made very clear that this is expectation on the part of the United States about South Korea. And I think South Korea, independent of whatever happens in the trade negotiations, will have to adjust its posture, also adjust expectations about the alliance, and also the nature of the alliance.
Mm-hmm. So it's not really a shift.
Exactly.
It goes with both sides. Then, Dr. Go, if the U.S. would formally demand this expansion of strategic flexibility of the USFK in the coming days or weeks or so, how do you think South Korea's next administration should prepare and respond to this?
Well, the issue of the strategic flexibility of the U.S. forces in Korea, or USFK, has been on the table since the days of the George W. Bush administration. So we have had plenty of time to adjust our expectations about the alliance. And this is not the first Trump presidency. This is the second Trump presidency. And the President Biden's attitude about the South Korea's future role in terms of deterring China from revising the regional security order has been very clear. They expected, even the Democratic administration, expecting South Korea to adjust its defensive posture regarding China as well as North Korea. So in that sense, I think we know it's been coming. And I think I think we have to understand that the alliance that we have with the United States is very comprehensive and also multimodal, so to speak. And then China is not exactly South Korea's best friend either. So clearly, China is a very important trading partner, but at the same time, China supports North Korea, has turned a blind eye to North Korea's ongoing nuclear development and threats towards this country. So strengthening the alliance is very important, and also the future alliance, it clearly has to have a very significant defensive posture towards Chinese threats. So in that sense, I think we can get overall a positive value out of this alliance adjustments that we are expecting to come in the next couple of months from Washington, as well as how the next of Korean administration is going to formulate its policy towards both towards China and the United States.
So we should be on the same page with the U.S.
Exactly.
Then, with this situation in the backdrop, North Korea seems to continue to develop its weapons system. The regime actually recently revealed footage of a live fire test of a new mid-range air-to-air missile, and some speculate that Russian technology may have actually played a role. Professor Myers, do you also think that this is a result of the transfer of Russian technology in exchange for North Korea's troop deployments in the war?
Well, not necessarily. I wouldn't say that's the only possible explanation, because North Korea made so much ballistic and nuclear progress before this cooperation with Russia. And Kim already said in 2021 that he was committed to developing ever more advanced missiles. So these could be indigenous developments. They could involve technology that was acquired discreetly from other sources. Besides, I kind of think that the Russians are not going to want to give away their latest technology to a country that fires missiles into the ocean, where they can easily be recovered by the United States or South Korea. On the other hand, North Korea has made enormous sacrifices to the Russian war effort, including 5,000 young men already. And I'm sure it wants more in return for that than just the kind of humanitarian 1990s style handouts like food and energy. You know, North Korea is a very confident nuclear power now, and it wants a reward that fits that stature. So I do assume that there has been some technology transfer. You know, the North could also be receiving a lot of Russian money in the form of tide aid, meaning that they have to spend the money on Russian products and services, and that could be purchasing a certain amount of technology that is being used in the missile program.
Right, so not necessarily the whole technology used in the air-to-air missile, but there could have been other sources of ways to help develop that. Now, so this recent air-to-air missile test actually follows the regime's reveal of its Aegis-style warship Cheonho last month. Dr. Go, we've been discussing in the past about North Korea's naval, army, and air force capabilities that are falling behind those of South Korea's. Do you think it's realistically actually possible for the North to close in the military gap with South Korea?
Oh, I don't think, realistically speaking, I don't think it's possible. And the reason why I say this is because the conventional capability, the military capability, is directly proportional to their economic capability. So the richer your country, the larger your economy, the bigger your conventional capability will be. And that has exactly been the history of North Korea's conventional capability, but in the other direction. What I mean is, North Korea used to boast very high conventional capability in the 1970s. But then that conventional capability edge has been lost because the North Korean economy collapsed. Since the 70s through the 80s and the 90s, it completely reached the bottom. And that's when South Korea, the conventional capability, completely surpassed North Korean ones and left North Korea in the dust. So now North Korea, in fact, what they tried to do to close that gap was to invest in this asymmetric WMD capability, which are the nuclear weapons. So now that they have, and we believe North Korea has reached very high nuclear capability. Some people are expecting North Korea to use the resources now to in the economic domain to develop its economy, but instead they are pouring the money into catching up to the South Koreans in the conventional capability domain. And I think it's going to be essentially a loss race to begin with. So let's take the example of a Cheon destroyer. It's characterized as an Aegis-style destroyer with guided missiles. South Korea has already 10 of those destroyers. So there are 6 from the Isun-shin class destroyers. There are 3 from the Sejong the Great class destroyers, which actually double the size of the Cheon destroyer that North Korean just revealed. And there's another one, actually 3 more coming, which are even larger ones. So in that sense, and then they take a long time to build. So each one of these destroyers takes at least 2 years to build. So it means that the North Korea, to catch up with the South Korea, will have to wait 20 years, with simple arithmetics. So, and that's just one issue. The time is one issue. The second issue is the resources. So it's very expensive to maintain this kind of capability in the long run. And so what North Koreans are going to face is that they're going to have a substandard capability which will never be able to catch up to the South Korean ones. But at the same time, they'll be spending an enormous sums of money to maintain them. So in fact, I think South Korean military planners will be telling the South Koreans, if possible, that no, go ahead, be my guest, because this is a surefire way for North Koreans to waste the resources, the precious resources that they have, on something that they're not going to be getting much out of it.
Then wouldn't Russia's engagement, Russia's support in terms of financial support?
Clearly, it's one of the factors that's helping North Korea to build up this this capability. But then again, there are opportunity costs to this. So North Korea could spend those same resources on something else. For example, build more missiles, and also build more, I would say, missiles that they just tested on the aircrafts. So there are better uses for their resources. So in that sense, even with the Russians' massive help, this is not the route that a rational military planner would take.
Thank you for that. Then, since North Korea and Russia, their ties are increasingly getting closer, Professor Myers, lately, Alexander Matsuroga, the Russian ambassador to North Korea, said that both parties actually plan to send multiple high-level delegations to each other this year, like in occasions like Liberation Day and the anniversary of the founding of the Workers' Party. He said there would be important exchanges to come. What do you anticipate these important exchanges would entail?
Well, if they're going to take place on very special days in the North Korean calendar, I assume they're going to be more symbolic than substantial. I think the Russians are going to want to do Kim Jong-un a favor by showing great respect for him in front of his people. And this means that the Russian delegations are going to have to be suitably senior and high-ranking. Now, I think these exchanges are also going to entail the signing of some new agreements that are aimed at deepening the cooperation between the two countries. And this is going to go down very well with the North Korean people, who have always worried a bit about the country's isolation. Refugees have told me that when Kim Jong-il visited China in 2011, shortly before he died, and the North Koreans watched the video of this visit on TV, they were so relieved and happy that they actually stood up and applauded. So they're going to respond very well to any display of Russian respect for Kim. And the Russians, in turn, I think, are going to enjoy the reception that they receive. Now, I think trade deals may accompany these visits, but Kim Jong-un is going to have to be very careful about how much of a fuss he makes about that, because North Korea has always mocked South Korea for getting money in return for dispatching troops to Vietnam. And he's going to want to avoid conveying the impression that his own troops are in a way, mercenaries whose whole purpose is to bring money into North Korea. In any case, North Korean leaders are not like Donald Trump, for example, for whom trade is an absolutely central concern. So I expect symbolic shows of brotherhood and solidarity.
Symbolic actions that could deepen cooperation between the two sides. Now let's shift to the UN a little bit. On May 20th, the UN General Assembly held its first ever high-level meeting addressing the humanitarian situation in North Korea. This is quite unusual that it occurred at the General Assembly level. How do you read into the significance, Dr. Go?
Well, the reason why the General Assembly has become the stage to discuss about North Korean human rights issue, because the traditional stage for this kind of topic, which is the Security Council, is completely dysfunctional right now because of a Chinese and Russian veto, and then clearly the Chinese and Russians didn't want to be seen participating in a discussion that only can be critical of North Korea one or another. So, and another reason why the General Assembly has a more of a prominent role now is because in the absence or for lack of a functioning Security Council, which can issue resolutions either condemning North Korea or sanctioning North Korea, the second best thing is the General Assembly. So in General Assembly, with simple majority, the General Assembly can issue a condemnation of North Korea's ongoing human rights violations. So even though that's not each of an actionable item like having sanctions designations, what it can do is essentially refocus the attention, the global attention on the human rights situation in the country. So I think this is essentially a political instrument now, and I think this is the reason why the concerned countries such as South Korea, United States have used the venue of the General Assembly as a stage to call the attention to the human rights violations in the country. So I think it's been a very clever move, and it's another way to ensure that the United Nations, which is dysfunctional stage because of the ongoing Chinese and Russian veto of the Security Council, can reacquire the importance that it's been losing in the recent years.
So this change in stage would definitely send a stronger message too. All right. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and for your insights tonight. We'll have to wrap up our discussion at this point. Dr. Go, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And of course, Professor Myers, we appreciate your time and effort.
My pleasure too.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame for tonight. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.